Asia was showing a little bit of a mixed picture. In terms of what's happening in fixed income, the 10-year Treasury yield giving no signals, unchanged, 177 handle. 10-year bund yield goes nowhere, negative 32. The 10-year gilt yield edges up. In terms of FX, again, quiet. And by the way, volatility is so suppressed across assets. You're seeing it on the VIX. You're seeing it in global FX volatility. The Bloomberg dollar index unchanged, but we're heading for a weekly gain. And then taking a quick check on commodities, WTI and Brent ever slightly softer. WTI at 58.44, Brent at 63.83. Roger.
All right, let's have a look at what stocks are to watch this morning. We've been joined by Bloomberg's Joe Easton joining us in the studio. So, Playtech, that's the Isle of Man-based tech company. What's going on with them?
Yes, good morning. So this is Playtech, as you mentioned. It's a technology company. They mainly focus on gambling. They've issued a profit warning today. This is really coming from their financial unit. So the company runs the markets.com CFD platform that's quite popular. They've had a warning in that unit specifically. So they've not really given many details on why, but they said that's the underperforming unit. We're seeing analysts cutting their forecast for earnings. At Jefferies, they're cutting their earnings by around 6% in terms of estimates for the coming year, although they do say that the valuation is pretty attractive anyway, and they're probably going to sell out of this unit anyway, so maybe investors should hold on for a while. But nonetheless, we're seeing Playtech shares are falling around 6%. That's for the gambling technology company.
Okay, what about Coates?
So Coates, this is everyone's favourite thread maker, which supplies all of the apparel makers. They've also had a bad warning today. So their group sales are seen growing around 1%. Analysts are saying this is below expectations, which are expecting around 2 to 3%. So this stock is not opening yet, but we are expecting it to drop at the moment. HSBC out saying it's very disappointing, and they thought it would be a much stronger report given the apparel industry is generally pretty stable at the moment. So Coates is set to fall at the open.
Now, Joe, in the run-up to the UK election, everyone's talking about housing, it seems, at least as far as the political parties are concerned. Various pledges on various sides, not least the Tories pledging that they will build more. The Labour also the same. But also now we've got this thing where there's going to be a markup, a surcharge on foreign buyers of UK homes. A lot happening. What's happening to home builders?
That's right. So this news of a 3% surcharge on homes going to foreign buyers, that's from the Tories, and we're seeing Berkeley Group in particular down around 2% today. So this is probably the company that will be most affected, being very London focused. So on this latest news from the Conservative Party of this 3% surcharge to foreign buyers. Separately, just take you over to France, where Edenred, the voucher company, says it's been victim of a malware infection or some sort of hack. That stock's dropping around 6%, so that's another one to watch. So firstly, the home builders in the UK on that Conservative update, and very different company, Edenred, dropping on a potential hack.
All right, thanks very much indeed, Joe. Joe Easton there on Stocks to Watch this morning.
Let's get back to our top stories then, Roger. And it's been a mixed picture on the trade front this week. The latest comments coming from China's President Xi Jinping, stressing the need for equality in a trade agreement with the US. It was Xi's first public remarks on a partial deal he could sign with President Trump. He said China did not start the trade war, and it's not something the Chinese want.
And Chinese Vice Premier Liu He has invited Robert Lighthizer to Beijing for further talks this month. And according to the South China Morning Post, Washington will likely postpone new tariffs scheduled for December, even if there's no deal by then. However, President Trump may soon sign into law a bill supporting Hong Kong's protesters, and that's a decision that could put the talks in jeopardy. Tom Orlick, chief economist with Bloomberg Economics, says until we actually get a trade deal, all these headlines are just noise.
Clearly, we're close to a phase one agreement. Equally clearly, a bunch of things could go wrong. And I think that's why we're seeing these headlines. Maybe they'll meet face to face. Maybe they're close to a phase one deal, but that isn't significantly moving the needle.
That was Bloomberg Economics chief economist Tom Orlick.
And meanwhile, we touched on this at the top of the show, Goldman Sachs is counting on trade tensions easing, and it says as they do, China's economy will stabilise next year. In the bank's 2020 outlook published today, Goldman economists write cautious policy support from Beijing will continue to aid the soft landing for the nation's growth, but its outlook for expansion is slightly below consensus, just 5.8% next year, according to economists at the Wall Street lender.
Now, despite the trade uncertainty, HSBC's CEO says China and Asia are still an immense opportunity for business. Speaking at Bloomberg's New Economy Forum in Beijing, Noel Quinn says it's hard to replicate China's production capacity elsewhere.
I think shifting production out of China or closer to the US, great in theory, but in practice, the production capacity of China is immense. The logistics capability of China is superb, and it's hard to replicate that anywhere else in the world.
And that was the HSBC CEO Noel Quinn speaking at Bloomberg's New Economy Forum in Beijing.
Now turning to the US, one of President Trump's picks for the Fed isn't so sure about central bank independence. We've learned the private comments made by Judy Shelton to a UBS executive last month. She's calling into question whether it should operate free of political influence. The president hasn't formally nominated her, and the remarks may complicate her prospects.
Now, hedge fund managers suffered the 8th straight month of redemptions in October. More from Bloomberg's Doug Kritzner.
A report from eVestment says investors pulled about $6.2 billion from hedge funds last month. It's an improvement from September, but overall the trend continues to be negative. So far this year, redemptions are at $87.9 billion, more than double last year. Clients are revolting against high fees and subpar performance. Bloomberg data show hedge funds have lagged the broader market, gaining just 6.7% through October. In the same period, the S&P 500 has returned 23%, with dividends reinvested. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Tesla has unveiled its first pickup, the Cybertruck. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow reports from Tesla's design studio in Los Angeles.
The Cybertruck starts at $39,900, can do 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds and tow more than 14,000 pounds. The futuristic, boxy shape is formed from the same ultra-reinforced steel that SpaceX plans to use in its Starship. The problem is it may be too niche. Analysts and investors here are concerned it won't resonate with the core truck buyer, but they'll have time to stew it over. The Cybertruck won't go into production until late 2021. In Los Angeles, Ed Ludlow, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Had a chat with Manus on TV about this, where he compared the attempts to shatter the glass to the two of us having a go with a sledgehammer about headlines at the top of the show. And I said, what does that make our producer then? The pickup truck?
Almost certainly, yes. So, because they shattered, we should say, if anyone hasn't seen it, it's a great bit of video. The truck's supposedly shatterproof windows shattered twice with a metal ball test.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, not good. Anyway, let's bring in something much better and much more secure and much safer, and that's Leanne Gehrings with the latest global news. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. Let's start with one of our top stories. Indicted on charges of bribery and fraud. That's the latest setback for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is the nation's first sitting leader to be charged, but he's hitting back, accusing law enforcement of trying to stage a coup. All this comes as an inconclusive election is raising the prospect of a third vote in just a year. Hong Kong's next flashpoint. The financial hub is preparing for local district elections scheduled for Sunday as it gets back to normal following days of unrest. Bloomberg's Karen Lee reports.
The usually low-key vote is garnering more attention this year, as it's set to be the first citywide exercise of democracy since protests began in June. It's emerged as one of the few ways Hong Kong's public can voice its opinion on the state of the city. Any delay or cancellation of the election could trigger further demonstrations. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Crossing over to Germany, Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats are meeting for a two-day party conference later. Bloomberg's Patrick Donoghue says unrest within the CDU is in the air.
Party leader Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, who took over the CDU from Merkel a year ago, is struggling to seize control amid political upheaval. The question on everybody's mind, who will succeed Merkel as chancellor, may be pushed onto the back burner. Still, a resolution calling on the government to impose a ban on Huawei may be a direct challenge to Merkel's coalition. In Leipzig, Patrick Donoghue, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
And the Conservatives are planning a land tax surcharge for foreign buyers of UK homes. The 3% charge on top of the existing stamp duty will raise as much as £120 million a year. According to a statement from the Tories, this extra money will help tackle homelessness. Housing is one of the key issues for voters. The Liberal Democrats are promising to ramp up construction, while Labour is pledging to build more social housing if elected on December the 12th. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Julian Chillingworth, Rathbone CIO, joins us as we count down to Christine Lagarde's speech in Frankfurt this hour, and also assess the state of the markets with uncertainty over US-China trade talks, meaning a lot of markets are in a holding pattern today. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants as